Hello guys, this is me again with another book review. This week we're going to talk about The Power of Now, a guide to spiritual enlightenment by Eckhart Tolle. This is the best-selling spiritual book of the last 20 years. It has been recommended by Oprah, and I must tell you that I was a bit torn when it came about Eckhart Tolle, because I've heard so many things about him, and to my shame, I almost didn't want to read something about what he wrote, because he was so popular, and it was almost like I was being bombarded with this Eckhart Tolle, power of now, power of now. But now that I've read the book, I've completely changed my mind. I find it absolutely amazing, just because Eckhart has a talent of putting into words very simple ideas that people just complicate. What's the main idea of the book? The main idea of the book is to live in the present, to live in the now. The source of misery and of unhappiness is connected to our need to stay stuck in the past, or to just project the future up to the point of anxiety and fear. And this is what contributes to our misery. In fact, I like it. I really like it. Eckhart talks about the ego, about consciousness, about awareness, and I found that I have a lot more compassion for people because of this book, because people just act according to their level of awareness, to their level of consciousness. You can't be mad on people who don't behave in a certain way. Once you understand that this is the level that they're at, I found also that this book helped me a lot with living in the present, living in the now, being grateful, experiencing gratitude before getting what you want. And I believe that identification with the ego is really, really unproductive. I liked it. And what I also think that it's important to take from this book is the fact that everything that is around us is a reflection of our inner world. People who just annoy us or who cause us misery and pain, they reflect a part of us. Once we live in the present and get away from the ego and from all sorts of mental projections, we become much more peaceful. Our mind can be our greatest enemy. Eckhart tells us how our mind, our incessant thinking, can become our biggest source of anxiety. The mind is a tool. We have to learn to observe and control our thoughts and ask ourselves, hey, why am I thinking this thought? Why am I sad? Or why is this situation causing me anger? It's usually almost connected to the past, something that annoys you in the present and you think it's connected with the present. In fact, it's something deeply rooted in the past. Once you let go of the past and of the future projections, you learn how to live in the now. I really like this book, and it's popular, it's all over the place, and it can become like something like a cliche to read an old popular bestseller book, but it's totally worth it. I'm already at my third reading of this book, and I think this can become a sort of a personal guide for you and for everybody else to live in the now. I guess that this is the book that you have to put next to your bed and or on your desk, and to constantly just read it and try to absorb that information and practice it in your daily life. I'll continue with a more in-depth review of this one, and see you next time. Bye.
Hello guys, this is me with the review of the book. Because it's winter and it's pretty cold outside, I decided to move this into my little studio. So this is the book, The Power of Now, A Guide to Spiritual Enlightenment by Eckhart Tolle. So I've read this book 3 times, I guess, and this was only to try to understand it. The book is like a dialogue. In the preface, he talks about how difficult it was for this book to reach the audience. I mean, Namaste Publishing in Vancouver published the first edition of 3,000 copies in 1998, and in the first year it was only through the word of mouth that the book got some grip. So it wasn't popular in the first year. Okay, so the introduction starts with the story of this book, how Eckhart decided to write this, and he talks about his depression. And he says, until my 30th year, I lived in a state of almost continuous anxiety interspersed with periods of suicidal depression. It feels now as if I'm talking about some past lifetime or somebody else's life. So he had a moment when he said, like, I cannot live with myself any longer, and the pain was so intense that he collapsed. And the next day, he woke up being completely reborn. And he talks about this experience. It felt as if the void was inside myself rather than outside. Suddenly there was no more fear, and I let myself fall into that void. I have no recollection of what happened after that. That day I walked around the city in utter amazement at the miracle of life on earth, as if I had just been born into this world. Very, very interesting. So what happened that night, in that night of dreadful pain? And Eckhart believes that the intense pressure of suffering that night must have forced my consciousness to withdraw from its identification with the unhappy and deeply fearful self, which is ultimately a fiction of the mind. And his life was amazing afterwards. He spent almost 2 years sitting on park benches in a state of the most intense joy. And the book was written from this moment. because people have noticed that Eckhart's state of mind, of peace, was contagious. And he talks about that. Later, people would occasionally come up to me and say, I want what you have. Can you give it to me or show me how to get it? And I would say, you have it already. You just can't feel it because your mind is making too much noise. That answer later grew into the book that you are holding in your hands. So I think that the depression that Eckhart had helped him in a way realize that life and suffering are almost always connected to the egoic mind. This is not the type of book that I could just take chapter by chapter and talk about it, but because it's made like a dialogue. He says that he took some of the live conferences that he had and live talks with people and put them into the book, but organized the book in such a way that it's like you have a question and Eckhart gives you the answer. He talks about several concepts. He makes some connections between Buddhism and life. And the main concept of the book is the fact that thinking is a disease, actually. Our mind, our incessant thinking can be our greatest enemy. Note, the mind is a superb instrument if used rightly. Used wrongly, however, it becomes very destructive. A simple test. Eckhart says that a simple test to see how much your mind is your enemy is like, do you have a turn off button for your mind? Can you just stop your mind from thinking? Well, I'll leave you to think about that. So, the single most vital step on your journey toward enlightenment is this: learn to disidentify from your mind, from your egoic mind. 80 to 90% of our thinking is pretty much useless because we tend to think about the past or the future, but never in the present moment. So just observe yourself. Another advice from Eckhart is to just observe ourselves and to ask yourself, okay, I have this thought, why do I have it? A really lovely quote: real love doesn't make you suffer. About pain. So, the conclusion that Eckhart has about pain is that pain is always a form of non-acceptance, a form of unconscious resistance to what is. On the level of thought, the resistance is some form of judgment. On the emotional level, it is some form of negativity. So pain is almost never connected to the present moment. So again, it is our mind making us go literally crazy. He also has a very valid point that people become quite addicted to their pain, that some people identify with their pain and with the problems. And another trick is to, next to observing your thoughts, to observe your pain. And Eckhart says, observe the attachment to your pain. Be very alert. Observe the peculiar pleasure you derive from being unhappy. So misery loves company for sure. You see, the things that Eckhart says are quite simple, and yet the way that we have to apply them in our lives tend to seem quite complicated. So how to move more into the now? To let go of your ego. So ego is a construct. Ego is not real. The ego's needs are endless. It feels vulnerable and threatened, and so it lives in a state of fear and want. So this is why some people are connected to their problems, because ego always creates problems. Moving into the present is the only way to be happy. There is no the time. This is something I found so interesting in this book, and this is why I had to read it several times in order to understand it. Time is an illusion. Time doesn't exist. We only have the present moment. Isn't that fascinating? There is another thing which I liked from this book. Oops. It's the difference between clock time and psychological time. So psychological time, it's when we move from the present moment. For example, and Eckhart makes it so clear with his examples. If you set yourself a goal and work toward it, you are using clock time. You are aware of where you want to go, but you honor and give your fullest attention to the step that you are taking at this moment. If you become excessively focused on the goal, perhaps you are seeking happiness, fulfillment, or a more complete sense of self, the now is no longer honored. So clock time then turns into psychological time. So we do create a lot of psychological time by projecting into the future, thinking about the past, not honoring the present. Isn't it interesting that somehow this book doesn't tell you anything new, but it is new from a perspective of introspection. He also talks about relationships and about being more aware in relationships and how to tell that you are more conscious. You can realize if you're more conscious according to the way you react to life's challenges. So if you become more unconscious when you deal with problems, this is an indication that you haven't gone very far in your spiritual enlightenment, and you have to work more. I really loved this quote. If humans clear inner pollution, then they will also cease to create outer pollution. Isn't that beautiful? This is why I really can't take page by page, because it has such an organic flow, this book, that you have to take it question by question and let a question lead you into a thought, and then that thought lead you into awareness. It's very interesting. Another beautiful quote: silence is an even more potent carrier of presence. So when you read this or listen to me speak, be aware of the silence between and underneath the words. Be aware of the gaps. To listen to the silence wherever you are is an easy and direct way of becoming present. Silence is also very important.